All right, folks, time to talk some Trojan football. USC and Fresno State in the books. USC survives. Stanford is the next in this murderers row. That is the first 6 weeks of the season for USC. We got Matt Lowry on the line. Before we get going, I want to remind you that you can join the Voice of College Football community, get all my predictions. 16-11 against the spread last week, so that will certainly earn you some money, 59% against the spread, and boy, some bad beats against me, but we look to do better and maintain that kind of percentage. We also have, of course, our deal with betnow.eu. The donations go to a good cause, and you get 100% added to your money. You throw in $100, you get 100 added to it by betnow.eu. Grab the link in the description section below and use the promo code MRTV. We got Matt Lowry on the line from Conquest Chronicles to break down some USC football for us. And the drama's already started, Matt. Unfortunately for your football team, on the plus side, you got going against Fresno State. You did just enough in the fourth quarter to avert disaster when it looked like you had the game in hand. But Fresno State came on down the field after a failed fourth down play. We'll talk quarterbacks and then get back to your analysis of Fresno State, because, of course, that's what everybody's looking at right now is JT Daniels' situation and the true freshman coming in, having to face Stanford on the road.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting right now because it's already difficult that USC has a challenging schedule, and coming into the Stanford game, it's already challenging enough. But now you're without your starting quarterback, and you have a true freshman in Keaton Slovis starting against Stanford in a pretty big game. Now, he didn't look bad against Fresno State. 6 for 8, 57 yards. Didn't do a whole lot of passing as they were trying to ease him in. They did a lot of the a lot of run plays, but looked good. He took me by surprise by throwing that long ball to Tyler Vaughns, but then the next drive follows it up with an interception, trying to look for Pittman. He said there was a miscommunication there. It looked like he wanted to hit Pittman on the inside. Pittman ended up fading to the outside on the long ball, led to a pick. But they're going to have to really get him ready. So there's no time to really ease him into things. They're going to really have to get him going, especially against a pretty good Stanford defense that held Northwestern to 7 points.
So we got Matt Lowry on the line from Conquest Chronicles talking up some USC football. And we always enjoy the discussion talking USC because there's a lot of opinion out there about coaches and quarterbacks and the brand name of the program and not meeting expectations in recent years. And we got Matt to help us out to talk some USC football with Stanford coming up this week, and their quarterback situation we'll get to in just a second. But that is a bit precarious as well, with KJ Costello, one of the best in the Pac-12, going down against Northwestern. So on one hand, Slovis not highly sought after, and not a 4 or 5 star coming out of high school, but he was good enough to beat out a couple guys that had fairly significant playing time in Matt Fink and Jack Sears. And so he took that number 2 job in fall camp. So he must have shown the coaches something.
Yeah, he did. The one thing that Graham Harrell and that Hilton preach about with Slovis is that he's consistent. He's very consistent. And that's why he ended up winning that job over Matt Fink and Jack Sears, 2 guys who, yeah, they had experience, but they battled consistency issues through the last, I want to say, 2-3 seasons that they were at USC. With Slovis, again, he has a great talent. He has a very high football IQ. Again, when your offensive coordinator is Kurt Warner and you've worked with Kurt Warner, that's kind of what's going to happen. That's kind of what's going to come. But it's going to be something to see on what he can do in a full game. Again, we only saw one half of it, but we're going to see what he can do in a full game against a pretty good defense. But I believe Keaton Slovis is going to. I think he's going to impress. Now, how much is he going to do this game? That's what I want to see. How much is he going to pass this game? I want to see that, but I know it's going to be a lot of get the ball quickly out of his hands and keeping the offense moving.
And that's the interesting aspect of this, Matt, is that when you predicate an offense and build an offense around the quarterback position, then you lose your guy. And there's a bit of a tumble in regards to we'll see how it actually plays out and how good Slovis is on the field. But in regards to the perception and the evaluation to this point, is that they're, despite JT Daniels not having much time in just the one almost full season, to show himself, and people were disappointed to a certain extent, but he did perform well in spots, and he is the future of the program, at least as it stands right now. That there's a perceived and expected drop off in talent and in production, but the offense is so pass heavy, at least the way it's been sold to us, the air raid. And I know that they've shunned that term in spots. But yeah, now the running game you would think would have to take a more prominent uh, portion of the offense as they move ahead, and will try to. Again, you say Stanford's got a decent defense. They do definitely have a decent defense. This is not, and again, we got to see the games be played. But through one game against not a prolific Northwestern offense by any standard, Stanford's not supposed to have as good a defense as they had during their Rose Bowl runs between 2015, 2011, 2015. Those teams it's just, to me, once you lock yourself into a system like this that's quarterback heavy, and then you got to change gears, it's going to be interesting to see how they call it. And like you say, they may not put a lot of responsibility on Slovis, but that doesn't mean he's not going to throw the ball a lot. They're just going to make easy passes for him. But maybe that gets predictable as the game wears on, and those cornerbacks start to, and those slot defenders start to jump some of those routes. We'll see.
Yeah, and with the run game but with the run game on Saturday, it wasn't bad. Actually, it was moving. They were moving the ball pretty well on the ground. Malapai looked really good and consistent, but he did last season. Stephen Carr, somebody who I expected to have a bigger season if healthy, he looked really good. Made quite a few guys miss while he was running, and again against Stanford, which really we know Stanford's MO is the run game. Um, it's going to be. I'm wondering if Stanford's going to be looking for that, or if USC is going to change it up and let Slovis throw the ball and just go, "All right, kid, here you go." But as you mentioned, it gets predictable as the game goes. So this is where I want to see what Graham Harrell does. Is if it gets, as the game goes, what adjustments does he make? And we saw it when he started going with the tight ends in the four wide sets, and basically using them as blockers, or having them run short routes, because they were lined up in the slot quite a few, after opposed to the four wide set that we saw at the beginning of the game with Velus Jones and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Pittman and Bonds.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and this is college football for you. We're only in week 2, and both offenses, based on the quarterback position, are up for grabs, and we don't know what we're getting. At least on the USC side, we know who's going to start. We know what they don't have now with Jack Sears and Matt Fink in the transfer portal. Do we know who's going to back up Slovis?
Yeah, well, Fink is still there.
Okay.
Matt Fink is still there, so he's the backup. Jack Sears is still in the transfer portal. Um, I don't think he's going to transfer until he graduates. So I think that's the plan there. But Clay Helton did, when he spoke about Jack Sears, he said the door's always open for him if he wants to come back and come out of the transfer portal. Now, whether that happens or not, that remains to be seen. But USC right now, they only have 2 scholarship quarterbacks that are healthy.
Wow. And then on the Stanford side, as I was getting to, was basically just we're only in week 2. We're just approaching week 2. We're only through one game and quarterback situations for both teams. And even though Stanford, like you say, what they like to do traditionally is run heavy, blast you with a fullback, run 70% of the time. KJ Costello has kind of changed that formula to a certain extent because they trust him so much, and he's man, I saw scouting reports during the offseason that some really, uh, respected NFL personnel people think he's just about as good as Justin Herbert. So he may not put up the numbers. Hopefully, he's healthy and play out the rest of the season. Putting up the numbers is another deal because he's lost his wide receivers and he doesn't have a Bryce Love to take attention away on the defensive side. But KJ Costello is one of the best in college football, and certainly one of the best in the Pac-12. And people have asked in the live chat whether he's going to play. We don't know if he's going to play. That evaluation's still ongoing. I got to think that's a day-to-day estimation, and maybe because of gamesmanship, even when David Shaw has a good feel and a pretty good determination on what's happening, he might as well play that to his advantage. Davis Mills, the guy that came in, the last I saw his stats, 7 of 14 against Northwestern. He was highly touted coming out of high school. I don't have his rankings right in front of me, but I remember talking about him and there being much talk about him. And when Stanford signed him, that they had signed an elite quarterback. So he's got all the skills. He's got the high ceiling, but of course, he's inexperienced. So it's a guessing game as to what we're going to see in regards to run pass ratio for either team, but they can't play scared, but they have to protect the quarterback, knowing that this could be something like we saw last year. We saw, I think, a 17-3 game. So both coaching staffs might be ultra conservative, not necessarily not throwing the ball, but throwing it in a very conservative fashion, trying to support the running game. And certainly Stanford with Cameron Scarlett has a decent running back, but nothing close to what they've had in the past with Bryce Love and some others. So it could be a rock fight to the end this coming Saturday, Matt.
Yes, it is. And as you mentioned, we're trying to find out what's going on with KJ Costello again, with concussion protocols. If that's indeed the case, these things are a day-to-day thing. So everyone's trying to find out what's going on. If it's KJ Costello, if he does end up playing, which knowing David Shaw, he could roll him out in the Coliseum, and we won't know anything. But with David Mills, it's gonna be interesting to see how they tout this offense for him, because it's the same thing with USC. You don't want to put too much on a guy who is inexperienced, but you don't want to give him too much, but you don't want to give him too little, especially in a critical game like this in week 2. And as you mentioned, with Scarlett, decent running back, but it's not like the guys they had in the past with Bryce Love or Christian McCaffrey, guys like that. It's not guys. It's not those type of guys. So I look for Stanford to kind of go run heavy. If it is Mills, I look for them to kind of go a little bit run heavy. Will it be a 17-3 game like it was last year? I don't think so. I think it'll be a little bit more high scoring than that, because I think USC is probably going to put up more than 3 points this time, I hope. But I'm just interested to see what's going to happen with that quarterback situation and how obviously that's going to affect the game, because Dina and I said it from the get-go when we heard that that Costello was hurt, was that changes things for this week. It changes things for the USC Stanford game. And if he is out for this game, that it's really going to change things, and it's really going to boil down to what to execution, really.
No doubt about that. And I was right in my memory on Davis Mills' performance against Northwestern. I watched almost that entire game. He came in when Costello went down. He didn't make any major mistakes. They had a lead, so he didn't have to lead the kind of drive to come back and take a lead. So Stanford had the game at 10-0, then 10-7, but they never trailed. And so Mills comes in, he's basically throwing on third down. They're trying to run the ball. They're trying to run out the clock. The defense controlled the game. Northwestern couldn't do much of anything most of the game. He goes 7 of 14 for 81 yards, doesn't turn it over, and basically just plays a conservative ball game and gets them out of Dodge with a win, 17-7. That was closer than the final score. They had a strip sack, touchdown with 10 seconds left, but Northwestern had the ball down 10-7 with about 25 seconds left. Costello, 16 of 20, had a touchdown pass, no picks for 152. Very efficient without, again, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside moving on, Caden Smith moving on to the NFL, Trent Irwin as well, guys that they had last year that they counted on that they're missing. So Stanford has recruited well at wide receiver. I gave it a look before week one. They have 6 high 3 and 4 stars at the wide receiver position. They just don't have a whole lot of experience or production coming back. Lost the guys I just mentioned. So it was going to be basically on KJ Costello trying to bring these young receivers along. And again, they went conservative against Northwestern. They relied on the defense. That was a smart game plan. They knew it was going to be this kind of game, 17-7, 10-7 with 10 seconds left in the game. So that's what we had against Northwestern. But again, Costello, you see right there what he can deliver against a really good Northwestern defense. 16 of 20 for 152, doesn't turn the ball over. And Davis Mills comes in. So that's a huge discrepancy. But again, as I mentioned, Davis Mills coming out of high school, and I knew, Matt, he was highly touted. I just looked it up. Number 1 pro-style quarterback in the nation coming out of Georgia. He was rated number 1 in his year of 2017. So he has been the guy that's been pegged to be the heir apparent. And so 2017, so this is his, I believe this is his redshirt sophomore season. And
Right.
the guy going forward, they probably didn't expect KJ Costello, who was in a battle with Keller Christ at the time, to be as good as he's been. And that Davis Mills would take over this program a lot sooner. But he's had to wait behind Costello, who's now an NFL prospect. So, yeah, the Stanford situation up in the air, USC as well at the quarterback position. So we'll probably get some hints of news coming out in the next few days. But we know what's going on with USC. But, man, they're paper thin at quarterback. All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking it down like nobody else online. Discussion, debate, and analysis like you won't hear anywhere else. Talking USC, Stanford. Matt Lowry's on the line from Conquest Chronicles. So what you do is you go over there and check out the USC football coverage that they have ready for you each and every day. And, of course, lock it in right here. We've got the super chat available to you to help us build the channel. Many of you watch us on a regular basis and understand what the vision is to build this out to be much better and more extensive going forward. But we need your help. So like, comment, subscribe, do all those good things to help us build the channel. Aside from the quarterback situation, Matt, as you look back on the Fresno State game, again, it was a situation in which USC took control at certain points of the game, kept letting the Bulldogs in, and the most critical of those times was the 4th down call by Clay Helton to try to ice the game, not kick it deep, put Fresno State in the hole, and make them drive the length of the field. It was a gutsy call. It didn't turn out, but the interception in the end zone was a great play. Tremendous tracking of the football to seal it for USC. But as you kind of run through both just any units you want to take on the USC side, what was your evaluation of the Trojans play against Fresno State?
I will say the defense in my mind was what I thought it was going to be. It's a young defense replacing a lot of veterans. Again, them giving up 400 yards offense to Fresno State was something that I don't want to say I foresaw, but it doesn't shock me. Their defensive line, USC's defensive line, looked amazing, especially Drake Jackson showing his athleticism. Was all over the place. He was just amazing, and I think a lot of people now saw why USC is so high on this kid. The secondary is going to need some work, but again, very young. They got torched a lot. They almost gave up a lot of deep balls. The thing is with George Reyna is that he wasn't connecting on the deep ball on the passes. But they couldn't bring him down that much. He was elusive. He was getting away from sacks and was extending the drive, which really hurt USC. So that was the big thing right there. Again, USC allowing 200 yards rushing, that's something that can't happen. Though most of it wasn't from up the middle, because the USC defensive line closed a lot of between the tackle stuff. It came from the reverses and from basically from the quarterback getting away. The offense, on the other hand, showed flashes of potential. First two drives, moving the ball very effectively when JT Daniels was in there. Then it got stagnant. Daniels threw a pick. He had a few that should have been picked off. They were moving the ball, they were just hurting themselves though when they moved the ball with silly turnovers, penalties, especially the penalty at the beginning. The one with Chase Williams and Stephen Carr both wearing number 7 on the opening kickoff. Don't know how they allow that to happen. Don't know how that happens. That was something that really irked me at the beginning. But only committed, I believe, 4 penalties, which really USC averaged about 8 a game last year. So it felt like more, but I mean, you could say that it was a positive there. I thought the offensive line looked really good. The pass protection looked really good. The run game looked good. Still a lot to clean up, but I think with USC, they got to learn to stop going away from what's working. That was the same thing that hurt them last year. Is them going away from whatever's working. I think they need to keep doing what's working, and if they could do that, if they stick with what's working, if they stick with the game plan, I think the offense will get better. I think the defense, it's a work in progress, but it's a young defense, with the secondary being very young and the linebackers, you're replacing a lot of guys. So I think they'll get better as the season go. But again, I I think it was it was very similar to a 2018 game in the season opener, but it was week 1. So week 1, you kind of see what more you have to work on going into the next game and moving forward.
Matt, I know you've heard it all off season, and it's been talked about when we've got such a long off season. A lot of things come to mind, and a lot of things get thrown out there that seem a little bit crazy on one hand, but seem to add up on the other. And it's been brought up in the live chat, and considering how USC looked in game 1, what the schedule looks like for the next 5 weeks, and JT Daniels going down, that Clay Hilton's days are numbered. Urban Meyer, obviously it lines up as an Urban Meyer kind of job that, man, for him to seal a legacy, boy, if he goes to USC and cleans things up and wins big, then you're talking about something that he may not be able to pass up, and USC may not be able to pass up to bring them back to Pete Carroll kind of glory. So that's from a national perspective. I'm sitting 3,000 miles away and take in all the national content and obviously deliver it myself. But that's what's talked about on a national scale. And then you got Urban Meyer in the Fox studios right there in Los Angeles, sitting next to Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush. And we know what Reggie Bush had to say during the offseason about recruiting Urban Meyer. Is it talked in a serious fashion among USC people that really know the program, know that what Lynn Swann's approach could be? Is that as heavy of a realistic rumor as it is nationally?
In all honesty, it's a possibility. It's a possibility of that, but I think it's going to be one of those things of, how can I put it? It's going to be one of those things of they'll get there they'll cross that bridge once they get there. The old fashioned term of that. I I think that they'll try to interview him. They'll try to talk to him if the job opens up. They're trying to see what happens with these next few games. A lot of people expect, a lot of people are saying, "Oh yeah, Urban Meyer will go. Urban Meyer will go." And we've seen this in the past when he was at Florida and he left and he said he wasn't going to coach, and then he ends up at Ohio State. I want to say a year or two later,
Yep, one year. He
one
was
year
out 1
later.
year. Yep.
So this one, I'm really interested to see if Urban will sit there and will say, yes, I am interested. I do want the job. But is USC even going to go that far? Will USC even venture down that road? I mean, they had a chance with Clay Helton at the end of this season. They had that chance to do it, but I guess Lynn Swan elected to how can I put it? I guess he elected to let Helton fix his own problem. If Helton can't fix his own problem going forward with a new staff and everything, I think Swan is going to end up pulling the trigger, and knowing Swan's job is probably in jeopardy already if he don't get this hiring right. Um, if he don't get this right, I think he's going to end up trying to make a full court press, and I think you're going to see USC make a full court press at Urban Meyer.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at on this. I don't know what Urban Meyer's thinking. I don't know if so. We've seen his past and his penchant for coaching. He's a competitor. He's got a fire to win, to prove things, to take on a challenge. This is obvious based on going from Bowling Green to Utah to Florida to Ohio State, taking on the next challenge and building a winner everywhere he's gone. He's turned it around. Bam. So his status is legendary. Even if he never coaches another game, the guy's got the best winning percentage in modern college football history. But we don't know. I will be the last person online to try to evaluate his health situation. A lot of people, it's phony, it's this, it's that, or they take it seriously what happened to him last year and what's happened to him in the past. I will never play that card because I don't want to play around with somebody's reputation when it comes to their health and what's serious and what's not. But based on the health diagnosis that he received last year, it is not good for him to coach. He cannot handle the pressure physically. It just he at this point now, if he separates himself from that and is able to get back to a good place and then move on from that, I don't know. So neither would surprise me if Urban Meyer never coached another game because of health risks and what happened to him at Florida, and then it reemerged at Ohio State in a different way that he could never coach again. I would totally say, well, that's what he told us. But on the other hand, it wouldn't surprise me if stepped away from the game for a year, just like he did between Florida and Ohio State. There's another giant of a program, one of the legendary programs to take over, and he just can't bypass this challenge, this desire he has to fix things, to take on the challenge, to win, and he could own the Pac-12, I certainly believe. So neither would surprise me. That's the wild card, is Urban Meyer's decision. USC's decision, I think, is pretty obvious. If Urban Meyer's there and he has interest,
Yeah, you
you're
have
at
no choice.
USC, and
You have
he's
no choice
one
but
of
to
the
go
greatest
for it.
coaches in the history of college football. I just think that it's a no-brainer. You go after him.
Yeah, you have no choice but to go for him. If he comes out and says, I'm interested in the USC job, I'm very interested in the USC job if he does want to come back to coach. And you mentioned Urban Meyer's the wild card here. But if he does say, hey, I'm interested in coaching again and I'm interested in USC, oh yeah, you send everybody. You send Lynn Swan, send Carol Folt, you send everybody to try to lure him to USC, especially if he's interested. Um, it's a no-brainer, especially the past coaching hires for USC. that ended up falling on its face. With especially with the Lane Kiffin's thing, and then you had the Steve Sarkisian situation, which you're still trying to reel from that. And then if Clay Helton folds, the ending of the Clay Helton era, which it looked promising with a Rose Bowl and a Pac-12 championship, only for it to fall on its face. Yeah, you have to hire Urban Meyer. You have to get this right, because you bring Urban Meyer, he turns USC around. Now USC's the giant that that everybody, how can I put it, that everybody believed that they could be since the Pete Carroll era. But again, it just boils down to if he's healthy, what his health is, and if he comes back to coaching because of that. If it's to the point where he can come back to coaching, then I look for USC to make a full on run at Urban Meyer. They have no choice but to do it.
Scott Reams makes a comment here in the live chat. We appreciate you joining us, Scott, as well as everybody else that's online and contributing right here about Urban Meyer had stated at one point, this was a long time ago. I don't know that he's made this statement in a long, long time. So when he was at Florida, he had an opt-out to his contract that involved two schools, Ohio State, Notre Dame. So Urban Meyer had a lot of respect for Notre Dame. He knows that it's a legendary job, obviously. He thinks about his legacy. I don't know that he's ever stated that, but I will conjecture to a certain extent. He understands legacy in college football and greatness and how that's determined. So he always wanted the Notre Dame job. He had coached at Notre Dame under Lou Holtz. So he had been at Notre Dame. I'm trying to add up the years. Yes, under Lou Holtz, he had been at Notre Dame as an assistant and always wanted that job. But he also is from Ohio, obviously the magnitude of that program as well, and always wanted Ohio State to be his dream job. So he had kind of dual dream jobs to a certain extent. He got the one. I think the only reason he's not coaching at Ohio State to a certain extent is because he didn't like how his discipline played out last year, and that became kind of a point of contention. And that, along with the health concerns, and I don't know how much of it was 50-50 or 90-10 or whatever it was, but I certainly think that USC would be a great fit for Urban Meyer. And considering the lack of elite programs, especially in that division, even if USC's thinking, this is not a guy, we're not hiring the next Tom Herman here who could coach for the next 20 years here. This may be a short-term solution, but it could be like a gold mine short-term solution. He could coach 5 years. We could win a national championship. He could own the Pac-12 for 4 of those 5 years. And, we're looking for the next guy maybe in 5 years, but we get what we want in the short term.
Yeah, and the thing with USC is that for USC, they're thinking of one thing: getting back to the top. You had a taste of that success at the Rose Bowl. You had a taste of that success winning the Pac-12 championship. But then it went to 5-7, and then now tough schedule. We don't know what's going on. And so they wanna get into the college football playoff. They want another national championship. He wants but USC want to win a national championship. It's been since 2004, 2005 that they've won a national championship. It's been since 05, 06 that they were in a national title game. It's been a long time since they were contenders for a national championship. 2017, that was the year they were supposed to, contend for a national championship. However, a loss to Washington State and a loss to Notre Dame kind of ended that. That it kind of put a halt to that. But for USC, and especially USC people, they're thinking, you're thinking national championships and college football playoffs. And with Urban Meyer, he brings that. He can bring that. So if he's there for 5 years, hey, he's there for 5 years, and you get your national championship, your college football playoff appearances, you get all of that. But not only that, you look at Ohio State right now, it looks like Ohio State is still in good shape right now to build off of that based off of what Urban Meyer left behind. The same thing could be done for USC if Urban Meyer does leave after those 5 years, but USC kind of builds itself up so for whoever that takes over is in good shape.
Yeah, interesting. We will see how it plays out. USC not forecasted to have a great season. We saw what they did against Fresno State, and we see what the next 5 weeks holds. It's a brutal run that includes BYU's the easiest game. That shows you right there. They're a decent team, and it's on the road. Washington, Notre Dame, Stanford. Can't think of the other opponent off the top of my head.
Utah.
Utah. There you go. The best team in the division, most likely the best team in the division who won it last year. Matt, what is your take on Clay Helton's performance? So the perception is this guy's got to go. He doesn't meet USC standards, but you point out the positives that he had to take over a team that was a bit in turmoil. You went through the succession of coaches and the misses because of the Lane Kiffins and the Steve Sarkisians and the issues that they had off the field with Sarkisian in particular, that Clay Helton really had to just come in, stabilize the situation at the end of one season. He gets into the next year. He gets off to a rough start, rights the ship, takes them to the Rose Bowl. They win the Pac-12 the next year. The real knock on him, even after those two successful seasons, was, well, when he got out of the Pac-12 and lined up against Ohio State and Notre Dame, then they showed that they weren't at that level yet. But he did win the Pac-12, did win the Rose Bowl, beat Penn State, a team that won the Big Ten in that Rose Bowl, and then, of course, 5-7 this past year. So what's your evaluation of Clay Helton's performance?
In all honesty, while he may not be the Pete Carroll that we've seen, or Nick Saban, or Urban Meyer, or any of these coaches that we've seen, the Dabo Sweeneys, he may not be that guy. But I've heard a lot of how he's a great person. He's somebody you could trust your sons around. He's a coach who you trust your son to play for. Great person, has the right things in mind. Uh, as a coach, you can see where there's no fit. Um, Game situations is still a work in progress. When he would run the offense, it was pretty much the same issue. Just coaching wise, it seems like there's an issue with discipline, with how he's doing, with how he's managing the game. His game management, honestly, is not the best. If anything, it has cost USC in quite a few games. But he's had the talented teams. He recruits very well. But just coaching wise, I feel coaching wise, it's just there's no fit there. And I think Clay's just trying to figure it out himself. He's trying to figure out what he can do. He's made changes on how he coaches, on how he disciplines, all of that stuff. He's trying to be a little bit more tougher. But I don't know. It's right now based, if you were to ask me based off of his track work, like his progress right now, he brings stability. But even you see it in the 2017 season, it's a struggle. You can see it's just not fit there at USC at the moment. But that could change. Who knows? I think the perception could change if things go well this season. The perception of him could change, especially with a tough schedule these next 5-6 games. It the perception could change on him, but I don't know. I don't see a fit coaching wise, but culture wise, stability and to get kids behind you. I think he did a pretty good job, but coaching wise, it is lacked.
Matt, we've alluded to the brutal 6-game stretch that starts the season. They get the first win, but this is the easiest game, at least on paper, along with BYU. So do you think there's any possibility that he gets fired before the end of the season?
If if USC has a losing record by the time they reach the bye week, I think that he'll end up being gone. If he gets through, I'm going to say if he gets through with maybe how can I put it? If he gets through with a win over BYU, and if they get through with a win over Stanford, then I think it's going to play out till the end of the season. I think you're going to wait and see what happens by the end of the season if they decide to let him go or not. But I with this stretch, and especially without your starting quarterback and with another true freshman in there, um, this it's going to boil down to what their record is come the bye week. And that really, I think now, especially with, I mean, I know it's easy to say, well, he don't have JT Daniels, his starting quarterback is out. But in all actuality, this speeds up that timeline, because if USC does struggle, and and then if you struggle, and if, let's say, they get blown out by BYU, because we all remember when USC played ASU in Lane Kiffin's last year, it took for ASU to blow out USC for USC to go, all right, this isn't it right now. If we see something similar to that, where they play Utah coming off of, how can I say, if they beat BYU and then they come off getting blown out by Utah and blown out by Washington in back-to-back games, Hilton could be out of there by the bye week.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I will have my prediction on USC and Stanford a little bit later this week. Typically comes out late Wednesday or early Thursday at our Voice of College Football community. As you can see on the screen, the link is below. Matt, I'm guessing you folks over at Conquest Chronicles make your predictions on the games a little bit later in the week?
We do. We typically will make it on Thursday or Friday.
There you go. Check out Matt, Dina, the rest of the staff there at Conquest Chronicles. They will have their predictions on USC and Stanford. It's a guessing game in terms of the quarterback position at Stanford. If KJ Costello is going to play, or they have to go with Davis Mills, who, again, from a talent standpoint, fits all the criteria and checks all the marks on the checklist. But in terms of experience, savvy, and knowing the offense and delivering and making the right decisions, of course, KJ Costello, there aren't many better than him in college football. And on the USC side, Slovis in play, a paper-thin depth chart. It should be fascinating to see how they call the game and how they use him in Graham Harrell's offense. Matt, we appreciate you stopping by and giving us the lowdown on USC. There's so much happening there with a brutal stretch of games. Clay Helton's hot seat, and of course the quarterback position with JT Daniels out of play. So, Matt, we appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you for having me. I always love coming on.
Matt Lowry from SB Nation's Conquest Chronicles. I will hang on the line for a couple more minutes. If anyone would like to call in at 860-325-3687, if anyone has anything interesting to say, it doesn't have to be Stanford and USC related. I'm wide open to talk college football. 860-325-3687. I'll hang on the line for just a minute, and we've got a call. Hey, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McGee Sports 4.
What is going on, man?
Hey, how you doing? I just want to talk about the Syracuse Maryland game.
Sure, let's talk it.
So, Maryland hung 79 on Howard last week. I thought that the offense showed that they're going to be at least one of the top offenses in the Big Ten. Syracuse, I think, won 24-0, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
To Liberty teams that had their head coach coaching from a hospital bed.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken.
You are right on all accounts.
Okay, good. Well, obviously, I don't think neither team is going to shut out each other. I think each team at minimum is going to score 24 points in this game. You think that's a fair statement?
That each team's going to score 24 points. I would be shocked
Yeah.
if this game was under 24 points aside.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So that's good. That's a fair point. I'm trying to stay as neutral as I can because I know I'm a Terps fan. At this time, last time I checked the spread, Syracuse is a 1.5 point favorite, which is fine. They're a ranked team. Last year they were better than Maryland, so give them credit. They earned the respect to be favorites in this game. But I think the upset's going to happen. I think Maryland is going to win this game, probably by a touchdown, maybe even 10 points. What do you think of that?
So, as you can expect, I wasn't exactly locked in on the Maryland-Howard game. There were other games of interest there. So, I saw nothing but a final score. I'm pulling up the box score right now because, of course, Josh Jackson took over. And I'm impressed with Josh Jackson. He's not a top-level elite quarterback, but his one starting season at Virginia Tech was very successful. Took them to 10 wins, took them to a decent bowl game. 25 touchdowns, 10 picks in his career at Virginia Tech. He's added to that now with 4 touchdowns and no picks against Howard, threw for 245 through the air. He's a running threat. And obviously, your rushing attack is one of the very best in the conference. So that's going to be a huge key to the game. Syracuse has recruited well at D-line. They're well fortified up front. And your running attack with Anthony McFarland and company, Lorenzo Harrison, had 62 yards in that game against Howard. Jake Funk had 79 yards. Just checking out the rushing stats that you piled up last week and running for 317. You only had McFarland run the ball 6 times, 2 touchdowns, and then he was taken out of the game. So your rushing attack against the Syracuse defense is obviously key, but once you put into play a running quarterback, in addition to having studs at the running back position, I think that's going to be a lot for Syracuse to try to handle. And Tommy DeVito in his, I think he had to start a game last year early in the season when Eric Dungy was down, but he's got a little bit of experience. He's been in the program for quite some time. But I think it's a fascinating game and one in a light weekend for big matchups. We've got the 2 major ones, and then there's a big drop-off after that, Stanford, USC as well. So let's say 3 big matchups that I certainly want to see Syracuse and Maryland play. I think it's going to be a fascinating game, and we'll see if Maryland, this will give us indication whether they're ready to challenge the big boys in the Big Ten East.
I think we are. Let me tell you a little bit about the Howard game since I watched the whole thing. What happened was that we were up 56-0 at halftime. We were up 28-0 at the end of the first quarter, and we pulled our starters, and the second string just balled out on them. Now, I know Howard is a bad team, but it was getting to the point that I thought we were paying up at least 80 on them. So, but Josh Jackson looked really good. Pigmeyer, the backup quarterback. Don't think he's going to play a role. Don't think he won't play a role in this game. I expect him to get some action as well.
Yeah, so your defense racked up 8 sacks and 15 tackles for loss, and obviously there was just a complete mismatch up front to make those kind of disruptive plays. I'm checking out Syracuse, and again, I'm going off last season. As I approach this in week 2, it's 2 teams that I know very well based on what they did last season and based on watching them both 5 or 6 times last year. But obviously, I'm not watching the Liberty game and I'm not watching the Howard game. I'm locked in on the big games. But so I didn't see any of this against Liberty. But obviously, Syracuse's offense did not exactly light it up. They had a field goal in the first quarter. They had single touchdowns in the rest of the game. The second, the third, and the fourth quarters, they had 1 single touchdown. So they didn't light it up offensively against a depending how you define. Well, that's just a strange situation.
I have to make fun of it because you would think Syracuse would blow them out, but with the coaching from the hospital bed, and Hugh Freeze, I hope he gets well soon. I think he's having a hip issue or something, if I'm not mistaken. But
it was it was only a 10-0 game at halftime, and Tommy DeVito had his issues. He only hit on 17 of 35 passes and threw 2 picks and no touchdowns. So he did not play well based on these numbers. Again, I didn't watch the game to see how many drops, but if he had drops mixed into those 18 incompletions, or he was under duress, especially if he was under duress, then that's a real problem for Syracuse if they couldn't protect him against Liberty. But they just the rushing attack was decent against Liberty, but they didn't tear them apart at 4.4 yards per carry. And that's with a 42-yard run in there from Mo Neal. So besides his 42-yard run, and he's their number one back, he only went 13 carries for 40-some yards, taking away the long run. So they couldn't really establish anything offensively and were not explosive in this game and not even consistent against Liberty. So the defense looked good, of course, in giving up nothing. But again, we're trying to rate the Liberty offense, which isn't much to rate. So Syracuse did not based on what I'm looking at here, not a dominant performance against Liberty.
True. And I respect Syracuse. I really do. But at the end, I think, I know you hate this saying, but I'm going to say it anyways.
Okay.
I think this might be a bit of a trap game for Syracuse. I think they'll be looking ahead to Clemson. I think, 1.5 point underdogs. So Vegas thinks this is pretty much an even game. And I'm going to go with my Terps on this one. I think we win this one. I'll give you a score prediction. I'm going to say, as of right now, I'm going to go and say 45-38 Maryland. I'm going to say we win this one by a touchdown.
So McD Sports 4, it's not that I hate the term trap game. I just would love to know if, first of all, I want a clear definition of the term trap game. I think we all understand the concept of the trap game. You're playing a team that's under the radar. You've got a big game coming up ahead. Do you look past that team and look ahead to the next big game? Or you just came off a huge monumental game in which either you lost in a gut-wrenching fashion or you won this huge game and maybe you get caught off guard the next week. I think we all understand the concept of the trap game. The only issue I have with determining the trap games is I have no idea, and nobody else does. Nobody has a clue as to what the winning percentage is of these trap games. So we don't know if the concept actually plays itself out in the results. We just kind of guess psychologically that it exists. And I think it exists. We've heard players and coaches talk about it, more so players because they're honest, but that they look past an opponent or they were so high off the last win that they didn't give enough attention to the next opponent. Oh, it exists because people are flesh and blood and they're emotional and we're human. We have human nature, and human nature is that you can't laser focus every week, and you may take somebody lightly. That I completely agree with the concept of the trap game. It just hasn't been proven as to whether it exists and actually is played out in the results on the field. Nobody's done that study for me.
Gotcha. And I have one more thing before you go. What are your thoughts on the Georgia State-Tennessee game, the biggest upset I've seen in years? What do you think about that upset?
My thoughts are pretty much what you just outlined right there. That's just beyond inexcusable. So you're taking a low-level Group of 5 team, and we'll see what Georgia State does the rest of the year. But they won two games at their level. It's not like they played in the SEC and won 2 games. They played and won only 2 games at their level. And I didn't hear any prognostications from anyone that Georgia State was an emerging power in the Group of 5 or anything. So nothing was expected of them this year. And this game's at Tennessee, of course. And it's not even a nail biter. It's not even a situation like a Michigan against App State in 2007, where there's a game-winning field goal that Michigan could have spared embarrassment and hit the field goal and won 35-34. They had the field goal blocked, and so it went down to the final play. Georgia State had a 2-score lead with like 3 or 4 minutes left in that game. That's just a complete embarrassment for Tennessee football. And again, it wasn't like there were a lot of freak plays, fluke plays, tipped passes, blocked punts, anything like that. They ran, Tennessee could not move the line of scrimmage on offense. Their rushing game averaged like 3.5 yards per carry. They got, I don't want to say dominated because it was a fairly close game, but they were completely outplayed by a low-level group of 5 team.
I think Tennessee has major culture issues. I'm telling you, Mark. I think they have major culture issues down there in Knoxville. But it doesn't surprise me. Mark, I'm going to let you go because my younger brother's bothering me right now about something. But thanks for taking my call, and go Terps.
We always appreciate it, man. Enjoy the game. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, and one other thought on the Tennessee situation when McD Sports 4 brings up trap games. Obviously, that was not a trap game for Tennessee. It wasn't like they just beat Georgia the week before and they had to take on Georgia State. This was week 1, and they don't play any huge non-conference games. Well, I guess they do now. I guess Georgia State was the team that they should have been looking out for. But Tennessee looked like they had a clean ride in the non-conference slate with BYU being its toughest non-conference game on paper. So Tennessee couldn't even navigate a nothing non-conference schedule in which you figured, okay, if they can go 2-6 in the SEC, just 2-6, and then clean up on this easy non-conference schedule and go 4-0, they'll make a bowl game at 6-6. And they haven't even played what was supposed to be their toughest, again in quotes, non-conference game in BYU, and they lose to Georgia State. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. This is D Tavai from Salt Lake City, Utah. And I just want I'm a diehard USC fan, and watching the USC Fresno game, I wanted you to see if you could just talk about like some of the tight ends from USC, because I know that there was some well, just for Josh Follow, how he last year played with Sam Darnold, how he was a key weapon on the receiving side, and I know that there's a lot of other weapons with with Brown and Jones, and just a lot of our receivers that we have. But I just want to see, if they are able to help out the backup quarterback for winning games, like in a way where they can just help take over. I just wanted you to just talk about that and see, what are some things that you feel like that because I know that we have a real good receiving line on the offense, but I just wanted to see what are your thoughts on that.
So you nailed it right there with your last comment. USC, by far, everyone I've ever talked to on the USC football side during the offseason, and it's obvious for me to see and everybody else that follows the program to any extent, is that the wide receiver position is by far the best position on either side of the football for USC. So that's a bit of a problem because you don't want the wide receiver position to be your best position because it's the most dependent position on the field, meaning that other things have to be in place for them to get the football. If you have a great defensive line, they're not dependent on anybody else. The offensive line is not dependent on anyone else. Obviously, they need execution behind them with the football, the guys with the football in their hands, but those are completely independent positions where the wide receivers, you could have the best wide receivers in the history of college football, and they can't do anything if the offensive line doesn't block, protect the quarterback who's able to deliver the ball on time and in the right spots and find the right receiver. So unfortunately, that's not a good statement to make. It's great that you have tremendous wide receiver play, but it doesn't help now that you've moved to a backup quarterback. Now it's going to be very key for those wide receivers to help out Slovis and make his life easier because as you well know, this offense is what it is, meaning it's predicated on the passing game and on tempo and on spacing, and they may run the ball a little bit more than they would have with JT Daniels, but this isn't going to overnight become a rushing offense, a power heavy rushing attack. They're still going to throw the ball even with Slovis. They're just going to try to protect him in a way that he's throwing safe passes. And obviously now the run after the catch is going to become crucial because the ball's going to be in the air for a shorter distance, and they're going to need running backs and more so receivers to catch the ball like 2 and 3 yards downfield and behind the line of scrimmage and make guys miss. So now it comes into play. The running of the football after the catch is going to be more crucial for USC's offense than it was before.
Right. How did you feel, looking at USC's offensive line and also kind of looking at, I know Fresno lost a lot of guys, but how they competed last year for their conference. Was it against Boise?
Yes.
Yeah, and then so they're a pretty good team, you know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
Utah State, but then to compete against like somebody like USC, but then having like for us having a lot of young people, did you think that we performed pretty well against them, or like? But I know we should have scored higher because we have a lot of key star players.
So my thought on Fresno State, and we did a preview of the game before the game, about 3 to 5 days before the game, when I dissected the personnel on both sides of the ball, was that Fresno State was bringing back a couple stars, 2 or 3 stars on each side of the ball, but basically they were depleted on each side of the ball, and Marcus Marion, their record-setting quarterback, was gone. So they were going with a first-time starter at the quarterback position, and they were basically depleted. But as you mentioned, they had the best team, or arguably the best team in the Mountain West last year. They won the championship. They beat Boise State in the conference championship game. So this is not a great win for USC. They did what they had to do. They outplayed Fresno State most of the game, but they had to hang on to win. They needed a tremendous play in the end zone to avoid disaster after Clay Hilton went for it on 4th down. But this is on paper the weakest team that they're going to face in the first 6 games, and BYU would be a close second. So they need to play better than this if they're going to navigate that first 6 games at anything healthy like a 3-3 record. 3-3 would be an accomplishment, I think. That means they're going to beat BYU, and that means that they're going to beat somebody out of Utah, Notre Dame, Washington, and Stanford, that they have to beat one of those teams.
Right. Oh, thank you so much, Mark. And just to let you know, Mark, every time I go to like some of the restaurants in Salt Lake City, I always see the players from Utah. And I'm like, $5, guys.
You stick it.
They give. I mean, I know a couple of them, but they eat at a spot over here by the park. So I always see some of the players like Bradley and I and a couple other players. But thank you so much, and man, fight on, you guys.
Thanks for the call. All right, USC call as the Trojans prepare with a backup quarterback and a lowly regarded, and I don't want to say lowly regarded, a moderately regarded prospect coming out of high school, but he beat out Jack Sears and Matt Fink for the backup job. All right, we've wrapped up on USC and Stanford. We appreciate you stopping by, and of course, tomorrow night is huge. 7 o'clock, Florida State Seminoles live. 8 o'clock, Miami Hurricanes live. Then at 9 o'clock, the Ohio State Buckeyes live show. And then at 10 o'clock, we're going to talk Michigan football live with Steve Deace right here. Steve Deace, Michigan podcast at 10 o'clock Eastern time. 4 hours of college football coverage live. And of course, we invite you to join the live chat and the best chat room in college football right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to videos, and we will see you soon.